welcome to the Fertility Conversations podcast. The goal of this podcast is to create more awareness about infertility and to provide support to people trying to conceive. Thank you for listening today, and we hope you will be encouraged. And now, here is your host, Ola.
Welcome to another episode of Fertility Conversations. Today, we're joined by a lovely guest, Ceire Nevins, who is a fertility coach from Boston, Massachusetts. She received her coaching certificate from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, which focuses on holistic health and the mind-body connection. Ceire also received a certificate from the Science of Wellbeing course offered through Yale University, which focuses on positive psychology and how to live a better and happier life. Yay. Ceire's journey through infertility led her to a passion and purpose, which is to support and empower women to own their fertility story and to break through the taboo of infertility. Ceire's details will also be in the show notes, so that way you're able to reach out to her and connect with her after listening to this episode. So thank you so much, Ceire, for joining us today. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we're finally connecting.
I know, yeah. After a while.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Yes, glad to have you here. And we usually start off by saying, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. Okay. I would love to.
Yeah.
So I was actually born in Ireland, and I moved over to the States when I was 5. So I am one of 4, and I feel like that will play into my fertility story a little bit, but I'm really close with my immediate family, and I think it's because we were the only ones kind of over here, and all our extended family was back in Ireland. So I am very close with them and always wanted to emulate that family growing up. But I went to school for fashion, and I was a jewelry buyer for 10 years for a prominent e-commerce website. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. And then over the last few years, during part of my fertility journey, my infertility journey, it really led me to the self-improvement and health and wellness world. And I really started exploring that and becoming passionate about that. And that's what has led me now to be a fertility coach.
Wow, amazing. Well done. Fashion, eh? That's really cool.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun.
And do you get to go to Ireland? Have you visited or since you left?
Actually, I'm really excited. In August, we're going to Ireland for my dad's 70th birthday. So we're having a big family reunion, and it will be my kids' first time going. So I'm really excited, but I haven't been back in probably like 9 or 10 years. So yeah.
That's amazing. That would be lovely. It's so exciting.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited. It'll be super cool.
Yeah. And so just again, talking about fertility, before we get into that, I know that you're married, and I wanted to ask how you and your spouse met.
Yes. So we have a bit of a scandalous story way back in the day. Yeah. So we started dating. I was 19 and he was 21. But at the time I was dating someone else, and he had just kind of finished dating one of my sister's best friends. Wow. He's a couple of years older. Yeah. So that was a bit of a scandalous get together, and we had to work through some people being a little upset. But it turns out, we are still together 19 years later, which is wild. We've been married for 12 years. He's my best friend. We've been through a lot together, and I couldn't ask for a better partner. He's pretty amazing.
Wow, that's lovely. And was it when you met right away that you knew you wanted to become a mom, or do you always know that you wanted to become one?
I feel like I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I think, going back to how I was saying, I was really close with my family. And it brings me back to like this one specific memory that I had with my best friend on Block Island, which is an island right outside of Boston. Or Rhode Island, that area. And we would just daydream about we each wanted 4 kids, and we wanted our husbands to be best friends, and I wanted them all by 30. And it was definitely just a huge belief of mine, but I still had like career aspirations, and it wasn't the only thing I wanted, but I knew that I wanted to be a mom for sure.
And you noted how from your previous career, you then, in the last few years, you then, based on your own fertility journey, you made some changes. So I wonder if you could share a bit about your fertility journey and your path to parenthood.
Yes, absolutely. And like, that's why I'm here. I'm so passionate about it now, because a big part of my story is that I actually lied about doing IVF, and I was so ashamed of my infertility. And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. And I just felt so alone and isolated and ashamed and broken and all the things. And so it was a long time after, until 2 years after my story, that I opened up. And that was really because I actually met a neighbor down the street, and we like immediately clicked. And she was actually from Ireland as well. And she had twins the exact same age, and she did IVF, and she was so open and confident about her decision, and like just her like was so comfortable. And I was the opposite of that. And so like I call her my twin flame now, because we mirror each other in so many ways, but she's also a twin flame, helps you overcome some of your insecurities and fears. And like through her, I gained the strength to open up about my story. And 2 years after, I told family members that didn't know, and my friends and coworkers. And it was just such an important thing, I think, to do, to let go of that shame and guilt, and just help me evolve as a person. And it's why now I can't stop sharing, can't stop talking about it. But I think it's just so important, and community is so important. And I just don't want anyone to feel so alone. But my story is pretty in depth. Like there's kind of two parts of it. So I'll start with like the first journey, and feel free to interrupt me at any time if I get too granular. But so yeah, we got married pretty young, because we had met young. So 6 years after we were together, I was 25 and he was 27. And I went off birth control right away. We didn't want kids right away, but I also wasn't going to prevent it. Like at the time, my best friend already had 2 kids, even though we were young. And my sister was pregnant at my wedding, and like it was just kind of around us. But I was enjoying my career at the time, so I wasn't being adamant about like tracking my cycles or anything like that. So then at around 27, I started to be like, okay, it hasn't happened, so like I really now would like kids, and started to track my cycles and tried the ovulation kits. And I could go on and forever about how frustrating I found those. Like I always just like, they didn't work, or I'd have a flash, the same flashy face for like 10 days. And so I became very frustrated after about a year. And so we went to see a fertility specialist then, which, as you know, all these like steps that we end up taking are just such huge leaps, and they feel so overwhelming, right? Like through all of these different, steps we take. But so the first, even just going to the fertility specialist was so overwhelming, and having all the testing done. And then we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility. So it was a little frustrating, but also kind of hopeful, because there wasn't technically anything wrong. Although it felt like there was a lot wrong. But so we were told to do 6 months of Clomid. And I remember even that choice was tough for us, because it increases your chances about 5 to 10% for twins. And I remember at the time, twins to us felt like just so overwhelming. And again, our perspectives change so much as we continue on the journey. And so we did 6 months of Clomid, and that didn't work. And then we moved to IUIs. And so that was also I feel like a very vulnerable experience, because like I mentioned, I wasn't telling anyone at work. And so I remember even going into work right after I had just had the procedure done, and getting a coffee with the coworker, and just not being able to like say anything that was really going on in my life, was so eye-opening. And it really just gave me that realization, like that human experience, like we just don't know what other people are going through, and just to really be empathetic and kind, we just have no idea, so that was a very vulnerable experience. And then those didn't work. And so then we were at the crossroads of IVF. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Ireland, and I was raised Irish Catholic. And so although I don't share these beliefs, it was really ingrained in the back of my mind, like this was wrong. And like, I really like, had a hard time with that decision of going forward with IVF. And so at the time, my husband and I we would actually wake up an hour before work at that time, and we would take our dog Banksy for a walk. And we really just like through those like years connected so much. And that was really like a great outlet and important to have. And during one of those walks, when we were faced with the decision to do IVF, my husband explained it to me as if like I was diagnosed with cancer, and wouldn't I use any medical interventions or medicine that I could to help, you know, with that condition. And it really is interesting, as now I'm in this infertility world, I feel like people don't really look at infertility as a disease, and it is a disease, like categorized by the World Health Organization. So I think it just helps to reframe your mind around it. And so when he explained it like that to me, I, you know, completely was on board. And so then, of course, once we made that decision, I also had the presumption that IVF was a guarantee. And I was like, this is obviously going to work. It's IVF. I can't believe I'm even here. I'm doing IVF. Oh my God, it's going to work. So then we did our first egg retrieval. And I remember even during that experience, we ended up having to do emergency ICSI with my husband. But I remember being in the hospital when they told us, and it just, again, felt like another blow, like of things working against us. And our doctor hadn't like prepared us for it. And it just felt like so overwhelming in that moment. But luckily the ICSI worked, and we had 3 healthy embryos. And so our first transfer, you know, we were told our chances were really high, and we were very hopeful. And then I will never forget getting that phone call that it didn't work, and we were just devastated. And I think that for me was a big turning point. And so for the next round of IVF, I was adamant on putting 2 in, the last 2 embryos. I was like, I'm so sick of being told like our chances are high, this is going to work. And I was just like, this is it, we're doing 2. And then that is what resulted in our beautiful twin girls, which we're so blessed with. Yes. So that was an amazing result, of course. But overwhelming, of course, to go through all of that.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. You know, congratulations on your twins.
Thank you.
It's interesting to listen to, you know, your journey, and that must have been so hard, and not having anyone to speak about it.
Yeah, I think, you know, that is really now like when I think about what I would have done differently, and advice to other people is just to get that support. And there's nothing to be ashamed about. Like, this is not your fault. And you know, not that you have to share your story with everyone like I do with the world, but just find a small group of people that you can confide in. And even now, there's just so many wonderful resources. And again, this was about 8 years ago. So I'm not sure. I'm sure these resources were there. I do feel like the Instagram community, though, is a great resource, and that wasn't there, or at least I didn't find it. But if you are listening and looking for support, resolve.org has so many great free support groups. And I think that's amazing to just go on, even if you want to turn your camera off and just listen. I think you'll find a lot of comfort in that. And there's also Fertility Rescripted. That's a wonderful free community as well. And there's like live chats with other women that you can connect with what you're going through. And there's, you know, specific support groups as well, like if you're going through donor eggs or IVF, primary infertility, secondary infertility. So it's just so important and to get support. And that's why I'm so passionate now about being a fertility coach and guiding other women through this really emotional roller coaster of infertility.
Yeah. So you say that your experience was your inspiration then, in terms of you becoming a fertility
Yes,
coach?
I think so. we'll get into the second part of my story, but I think with the first part of my story, I really resisted it. You know, I didn't tell anyone, and I feel like what you resist persists. And I think when I continued to try to build my family is when it kind of came back again to haunt me, and I really had to face this, and had to do, you know, a lot of inner work on myself to figure out how to move forward from where I was stuck. But so, yeah, so I can start to talk about the second part,
Yeah,
kind
sure.
of, that will tie some of it in. But after, something that is important to mention, after my twins, we actually had a surprise pregnancy, which I never could have imagined, with my son. So he's actually a year and 1 week apart from the twins. So he almost gets that triplet title, which is wild. And his story is kind of interesting, because I, after carrying the twins, had developed an umbilical hernia. And so I was going in for surgery actually the morning I found out I was pregnant with my son.
Wow.
So I had a routine doctor's appointment, and she had done like a pregnancy test because I think she knew I had the surgery coming up. And so that morning, you know, my mom's on her way. She was going to watch the twins. They were only like, I think 4 or 6 months old at the time. And then my husband was going to take me in for surgery. And then my doctor called that morning, and she's like, I have some news. You're like 4 months pregnant. And I'm like, what? You know? And at the time, you know, my body was so like different from the twins. And I just thought, you know, and it was already pushed out because of the umbilical hernia. And so but that was, I mean, that was the best news we ever could have.
Wow, what a miracle.
Yeah, it really was. I was, we were so taken aback and so happy and just overjoyed. It was incredible. And so I have my twins and my son. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I always dreamed of having 4 children. And I say that really sensitively because I know how hard that is for people with infertility and are just desperate for one child. And I was there, and I just want to make sure people feel seen. I don't want that to come off the wrong way. But it was a really big belief that I tied to my happiness, I think, really without understanding how heavily it weighed. And I started to run on autopilot and miss the joy in front of the 3 kids I did have. And I was just, not being present. And I was so siloed on this one goal of like, I will only be happy when my family is complete, when I have 4 kids. It was just totally ingrained in my belief system. And, you know, now after doing all the work and identifying why, it's wild to know, like, there's, as humans, we have 12 to 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those are repetitive, and then 90% are negative. So it's just so important, like, to give yourself the self-compassion that you deserve on your infertility journey, and how like much these thoughts weigh, and also just to pay attention to them. Because I think sometimes we just run on autopilot and don't reevaluate things, right? And again, when I made that belief that I had, I was probably 15 on Block Island on that story I was telling you with my best friend. And then I didn't ever reevaluate it as a new mom of 3 with 3 kids under 3, you know, and my husband not wanting a 4th. So we were fighting all the time, and it was really not a great, you know, place to be. And I just would not let it go. And so that was really tough. And so finally, like, I did convince him to try after a while. And then he was like, we're not doing any art assisted reproductive technology. And so that was when, for me, I became really obsessed with like my diet, and I became vegan, and I became, a term that's called orthorexic, which it's where you get really obsessive about the quality of what you put in your body. Like, everything has to be organic and clean. You know, I wouldn't go out to eat. And if I went to my mom's house, I would bring my lunch. Like, it just became a bit paralyzing. And I will say, you know, obviously, knowledge is power. And I did try and educate myself and learn about how to take control of my fertility. And some of those resources I'm happy to share are wonderful, which is How to Take Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. And she does an amazing job teaching you about, you know, the 3 fertility signs of your body, and how to identify those. and just like the FAM method, fertility awareness method, using those 3 signs to like track your ovulation. And I still use her book for like my hormone health today. So it's wonderful knowledge. And then another book I read was It Starts with an Egg. And that is also a wonderful book, but can be very overwhelming as well. Like that was my first exposure, right, to endocrine disruptors, which are hormones that or chemicals that interfere with your hormones. And I just felt like, I would stare at my plastic water bottle being like, you were the reason I'm not pregnant. I was taking it next level. And because it was the first time I was learning about that stuff, and it felt really overwhelming and paralyzing, to be honest. And so really now, like, I just try and help clients focus on like progress over perfection, because it's nothing, you could never eliminate all toxins. It's absolutely impossible. And so at that time, I wasn't coming from a place of empowerment. My husband really didn't want a 4th. I was kind of forcing him into trying, and I was being resentful. I felt resentful towards him because I felt I was doing all of this work on my body and depriving myself so much. And then one of my kind of rock bottoms was I had just bought a new car, a Chevy Traverse, and I was pulling into CVS and I hit a parked car. Like, I was just so like the headspace that I was at. I was so overwhelmed and sad. I think I had got my period that morning, and I just sat there and cried. And I realized like I have to make a change. And so that was when I went home and I tried to do some research, and I found a fertility coach. And so even just from that one phone call with her, I could hear myself from an aerial view, like an out of body experience. And at the end of the call, I was like, can I pay you through Venmo so my husband doesn't have to know? And I just realized, like, when I hung up, I'm like, okay, Ceire, you cannot keep going like this way. Something doesn't feel right. This isn't a partnership. This doesn't feel like good, and so she became a bit of a mentor, and she is the one that told me about the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. And so that's where I went to school for health coaching and fertility coaching. And so the philosophy of that school is wonderful, and just ties into that headspace of where I was at, like where I was just trying to be like completely healthy with what I put in my body, but was like not in tune with the relationships in my life. So their philosophy is you have your primary foods, which is everything that you eat, and then your secondary foods, which is your relationships and your career and your body movement and your spirituality. And that if you're not balanced in all of those different areas, then something's out of whack, and you got to pay attention to that, to all areas, and not just one, like not just eating super healthy. Or so through that year, I really did a ton of self growth and self healing, and learned many holistic tools to help me really identify that belief system I was so tied to with my happiness, and how to change from that goal set into really a system mindset of having a daily practice of meditation and journaling and breath work. And I'm a runner, and just things that learning more. I lost myself so much in infertility, and just getting a piece of me back, and even becoming a different, better version of myself. And so that really is kind of what birthed this fertility coaching career for me. So instead of a 4th child, I really fell into this passion for fertility coaching and trying to help other women on their journeys.
Wow. Because
a lot.
it is, but you highlighted a lot of important factors and realities of infertility, right? Because again, and it was right for you to state what you wanted. You felt that having 4 children was important to you, and that's what you wanted. And that should be respected as well, because yes, there are people that are still trying to have their first children, but that's, both journeys are valid. And so just in case, and just for anyone listening, it's fine that if you want more children, and it's fine if you're trying to have your first. Like, both situations are fine. We're all at different stages in our journeys, and that's okay. But it was interesting to note how from your training and your coaching, letting you know the importance of balancing both your primary and secondary foods. I never heard that before, but it really is important, right? That everything plays a role.
Yeah, looking at yourself as a whole, exactly, and making sure you're balanced. And I just think, I never really sat and reevaluated this belief that I held on to for so long. And is it tied in with my values and what I value as a person? And it was just learning all those, like, I feel like everyone should be able to go to this school and learn these holistic tools, like, to help with adversities in your life. I think that's a gift that infertility gave me, is just finding a way to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And that's definitely in infertility, but that's in so many other avenues of life as well. And just, I feel like infertility is learning how much life is out of our control, unfortunately, just as so many other things are. And so it's important to try and be able to, like, live through that. And that's a big part of infertility is unfortunately we stop living because we're tied down to doctor's appointments, and we're like constantly overwhelmed with the anxiety of it and the what ifs. And I think just trying to stay grounded when you can, and be in the present moment and celebrate the small wins along the way is so important and so hard. I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's always, and it's a practice, right? It's like, it's trying things every day that help you to feel your best, or as best as you can in that moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well said. And the fact that, you can easily get obsessed with trying to eat right.
We're doing all the shoulds and do's and the don'ts. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is it takes over your whole life, is like, and then you have that like inner voice of just constantly hounding yourself negatively. Like, you shouldn't have had that glass of wine, or you shouldn't have that piece of chocolate. And it's like, just so overwhelming. And I think what infertility taught me as well is just like really how to show yourself self-compassion, and like speak to yourself like you would your best friend, and like validating why you're feeling this way. I think we try and, like, with infertility, push it away, everything's fine, and go on with other aspects of your life, but it's not fine. And it's like so challenging. It's like we all have this picture in our head of what we always like grew up to imagine our family would be, and it's ripped away from us. And it's like a really, really a tough thing to come to terms with and accept and evolve with. And so, I think infertility just made such an impact in my life, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we, of course, like, and it's right, like you said, infertility, I don't think you live infertility unchanged. It usually definitely leads a change. It changes in so many ways.
Absolutely.
How did it impact yourself and your spouse and the relationship? Because I know you noted earlier how you had an idea of what your family should look like, and he had a different idea. And
yes, it was really hard. I mean, the first time I mentioned, when we were starting to grow our family, we had never been more connected, and we would carve out that time. We would go for hour walks with our dog, and I would look for signs, and I would find dandelions on our walk, and I would always make a wish, of course, for our family. And so to this day, when I see a dandelion, I still, like, it's weird. I go to make the wish, and I it's now changed, but it's like I always now am wish for healthy and happy kids that I have. But it's like, it's still there where I like go to make that wish. And they just have such a strong meaning for me. But so that was our first experience. And then the second experience was really rough. I'd say for like about a solid like year of just fighting and arguing and not being on the same page. And we'd always been on the same page. And it was so hard for me, again, to just let go of this one dream. But it was like our home was beautifully chaotic. Trust me, it was not quiet, and I was working full time, and I wasn't really listening to myself. I was like, again, just so siloed. I didn't like stop to reevaluate, oh, okay, like I'm blessed with these 3 beautiful kids. I'm working full time. I can barely like even get any sleep or even like function. And then I'm fighting with my husband all the time. And so it was really challenging during that time for sure. And I think luckily through doing the self-work that I did, that was able to repair it. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing that and being so vulnerable to share, because I know that it is definitely an impact. It's an area that's highly impacted in different people's relationships. It's just, people have different ideas of, what options should be considered or when to start this or what not to do. And it's different. And everyone has different coping mechanisms, where I might think, well, you should cry more. And the other person thinks, no, I don't want to cry, or I want to talk about it. The other person doesn't want to talk about it. And so it does have such a huge impact on relationships. So thank you for sharing your experience and how it impacted you. And you mentioned that, you doing your work with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition was very helpful. So, for anyone that might be listening and wanting to do the same, do they just reach out to you about it, or do they go online? And is this available online as well, or do you have to go in person?
For the class? Yeah. So it's called IAN. It's you can do it virtually, actually. Anyone can. It's a bit expensive, but it's a year course for health coaching and all about wellness. And it's wonderful. It really is. It teaches many different tools, and that's really what I have used as well in my fertility coaching that I do for other women. Is I'm really passionate about helping them find, mindset tools and ways to deal with adversity and anxiety, things that work for them, like meditation and journaling and movement, and crying, like you said, or all this different self-care. Honestly, like I think a big part of infertility is trying to kind of avoid the pain that's unfortunately inevitable. And I think it's just making sure that you don't push away those feelings, and that you can hold a space, for like fear and hope and sadness, like everything. There's mixed emotions. And so I think it's just, it's overwhelming. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. And for people listening, wanting to reach out to you for support or for coaching, what are the best ways to reach you?
So my website is The Fertility Mama, spelled MAMA. And so you can email me through there, or you can actually book a free consultation through there to start. And then my Instagram handle is The Fertility Mama as well. And you can always DM me as well.
Okay. And for people that are like listening and wanting to know perhaps you have what type of people, or what people, what level of their journey, or what stages of their journey, who is your average client, for example? So who can reach out to you?
So literally anyone. I think I do one-to-one coaching, and I really try to meet everyone where they're at. So of course I have like a training, and there's things that I like to expose people to, but everyone is so different. And as we know, the areas of infertility affect like so many different areas, like your relationship, if that's something you want to focus on, or your, just different areas in fertility. But I work with women for trying to help them like take control of their fertility. So some women I work with now are doing their working on the 3 fertility signs and really getting to know their body, and haven't started any ART procedures yet. And then some of the women I work with are already doing IVF, and and then some women I've worked with through pregnancy. So it's really a variety of support of where people are kind of feeling stuck, and we can identify that and work through it together. And I can try and help them. If I don't know the resource, I try and find the resource, or or if I do have that, then like if I have that experience through IVF or helping them find fertility clinics, even switching fertility clinics is something right now that we're working on with one. So it's kind of just a variety. But like I was saying, I'm really passionate about helping women find themselves again when they feel lost. So really trying to like help them with self-compassion and those, holistic tools that I mentioned earlier of journaling and movement and meditation and breath work. And then as well as where they want to focus, if it's on their specific fertility through diet or if it's through art procedures. So it's a bit of a variety. I know some coaches are just one thing, which I haven't done that yet because I tend to work with broad people so far. So all women are welcome.
Well, that's great though, because it's nice to be able to reach out to someone and knowing that they can help you regardless of where you're at.
Yeah.
Because and then people, even you can set up the client that was perhaps trying to conceive, and then even after conceiving throughout the whole pregnancy, and then even after they have kids, they can still need support. So
it's if they need change. That. I think exactly. I think it's really about like community and connection for me too, and helping women feel seen and heard and valued and validated for why they, how they're feeling, I think. And infertility is, like we were saying earlier, it feels like it's not looked at as a disease, but it's the mental impacts are comparable to people diagnosed with like really serious illnesses like cancer and HIV and heart disease. And so again, it's just like really validating that for women and making sure that they feel seen and that they know how valid their feelings are.
Exactly. And that's so important. And that's why I really love the fact that, when you were talking to your husband and he kind of brought that in there, that, if there was someone that had another disease, they will seek treatment and it's a disease. And I think that really is so important to know that it's not your fault. Like it's not, it's nothing you've done.
Exactly. And like, unfortunately, our inner voice is so tough on ourselves and we just kind of continue. And I think just the value in general that society puts on women being mothers and the pressure around that, and you feel less feminine, and it's like this whole other baggage tied to it as well. And so it's really important, and I hope everyone that's listening just knows it's not their fault and they're not alone. And they're not broken,
Thank you. So important. And so helpful to know that. Thank you. Do you have any quotes or affirmation that you found really helpful during your journey that you'd like to share?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a big advocate for signs. And I was listening to Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist. I was listening to him on a Jay Shetty podcast, and he was talking about how you can actually, like, how signs actually release dopamine, which is like the feel-good hormone, and that you can actually train your brain to tie that sign internally and externally. So if you find a sign, like for me, it was dandelions that gave me hope, that even if you just visualize them, if you're not seeing them, it will make you feel better in that moment. So definitely for me, like that was really helpful and encouraging on my journey. And I think now, as I'm helping women, I try and tell them to look at it like you trying to trust that the dots will connect in the future. So Steve Jobs' commencement speech in Stanford, he said, we can't connect the dots looking forward. We can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that one day they will connect. Yeah. And I think that's really beautifully said, and really hard to do when you're in the thick of it and when horrible things are happening and you have to move forward, but it's just to hold on to hope when you can.
Yeah. So well said. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And knowing all that you know now, Ceire, looking back at 21-year-old you, what would you tell her?
Oh my gosh, I would tell her that there's nothing to be ashamed of. And what we said, it's not your fault. You're not broken. And I would really say, please get the support you deserve. Like, don't keep this a secret. There is like nothing to be ashamed of, and shame dissipates when we talk about it.
Yes.
So I would really tell my younger self to get the support that she deserved, and to find community. And there's such a beautiful connection in this community with people. And it's so meaningful and so helpful.
Beautiful. Love that. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And as a wrap up, are there any final words or words of encouragement that you'd like to say to anyone that is listening currently on their own fertility journey?
Yes. I would love to I really want to honor everybody where they are on their journey. And I just want, again, them to feel seen and heard. And another quote that I do love by John Lennon is, "It's going to be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end."
I love
and
that one.
I love that one, and it kind of covers all different outcomes and journeys. All of our journeys are so different. And it just kind of also ties into like, you're connecting the dots right now, and it will all come together the way it's going to in the end. So,
Yes.
and yeah.
Yes, I love it. I love that one. I always write it out.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ceire. It has really been a pleasure having you on here today. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. Thank you because, for highlighting the importance of speaking out and sharing, because it's so important that we continue to speak so that we can destigmatize infertility. Because again, like you said, it's not anyone's fault. You haven't done anything wrong. So,
well, thank you so much for the community you provide, and for having this podcast so people can share their stories, and your wonderful, inspiring Instagram. Honestly, you're amazing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ceire. And you too, you're amazing. I really have been blessed having you on here. So encouraging and really insightful for sharing your story and all that you're now doing to support other women. So that's amazing that, you didn't, like, after having your family, you still went ahead to provide support, knowing how important that would have been for you during your own journey. So thank you for all that you're doing. It's really appreciated. And we look forward to having you again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Fertility Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram at Fertility Conversations. If there are any topics you would like to have discussed, please send an email to fertilityconversations@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. Thank you again for listening. Take care of yourself and do stay hopeful.